Hi, in this video I'm going to talk about how professional help can help to reduce anxiety. I'm Orla Kirby, I'm a therapist and I specialise in working to help people move themselves away from severe anxiety and or OCD. Now, if you ever struggle with anxiety, or particularly severe anxiety, you will know that it can be a hugely challenging thing to deal with on a daily basis and very challenging to move yourself away from. So I brought together some resources here on just kind of to give you an overview of the ways in which professional help can be really useful that might just not have occurred to you before. So by professional help, I'm talking about quite a broad range of professionals here. So, therapy, coaching, acupuncture, energy work, going to see your GP or doctor, meditation training, meditation course. There's so many I haven't mentioned there, right? So, the nutrition is hugely useful. Reflexology, I understand to be really great. So, and there's a lot that I don't know. There's a lot that I wouldn't even have heard of, right? That's probably amazing. And I think different people are drawn to different paths at different points in their life. And you have your own kind of internal instinctive wisdom about what's right for you at any particular point in your life. So I would really advise just simply finding out as much as you can, or about a few things. Maybe it might be overwhelming to find out about every possible form of professional help you could get. But maybe pick one or two or three that appeal to you and find out a little bit about each one, and then go from there, right? It's also about finding a therapist or a professional who chimes with you and who you feel like, oh, I would get on with that person. I can see that I would work well with that person. I think we'd be a good fit, right? And that's a hard thing to develop a criteria for, but it might be just down to having a chat with someone and seeing, do you get that feeling? Do you get that sense? Okay, so I'm going to talk about being able to ask questions of an expert person. I'm going to talk about helping with awareness of what you're doing and how an expert person can help with that. I'm going to talk about getting really specific and great guidance. And I'm going to talk about an expert person using their skills to actually do something in the moment. Now, of course, because I'm a therapist, most of this is going to relate more to therapy. But I mentioned the other things at the start there because I don't want to sort of pretend therapy is the only way, or, I think there are lots and lots of things that can help with anxiety, lots of different paths. And of course, within therapy itself, there are many different types of therapy. So of course, also when I'm talking about therapy, I will mainly be referencing the kind of therapy that I do, which is solution-focused in therapy and also neuro-linguistic programming. And of course, there's just so many different kinds of therapy too. So, first of all, professional help is really useful in bringing down anxiety because you can ask questions, right, and get answers that are very specific to you. So if you're watching videos like the videos in this series, of course, there's some really great information here, but I'm sort of making these videos for a lot of people. So I'm trying to make the information in them work for lots of people at once. That's very different to if I meet you as a therapist, or any trained professional skilled person comes across an individual client. Hopefully that trained person is going to have skills and awareness that allow them to assess very early on in meeting that person, what kind of person is this? And they might do that consciously or they might do that subconsciously. What kind of learning are they going to respond to well? What kind of process are they going to respond to? Or how do I introduce this process to them so that that's going to make the most sense to them or feel good to them, or so that they can get the most use out of it, given who they are specifically. Right, it's a very different kind of response you're getting than if you're reading a book or reading blogs or watching videos, although these can all be great sources of help. And I really think that there's a different level of specificity if you are working with an expert person who is addressing things directly to you. And of course, everyone has different questions. So, it's not always, our ways of understanding things are so different. That you might simply have questions that you aren't seeing answered anywhere, right? You might be trying to apply things from a book or a video, and thinking, oh, well, okay, fair enough, but I get stuck with this bit. Or well, what happens when this happens? Or how does this thing interact with this thing? Like, this thing seems true, and that thing seems true about anxiety or about calm or whatever, or about confidence. But when I put them together, like, they don't make sense, right? And someone who has a lot of skill and experience with handling and managing all of this kind of thing is going to have some ideas for you there, right? And it's not about someone giving you the perfect answer or instructing you, like, you must do this, hopefully. But it is being able to access, resources that might be outside the resources you currently have, which is understandable if your job isn't this, right? Your job may well be something entirely different. And actually, even if it is your job, right, just having an outside person, sometimes even someone telling you stuff that you do already know, really, but saying it to you specifically and saying it in a way that you need to hear it, is different from just knowing it already, right? It's a bit hard to put your finger on what I mean there, but, I know a lot about the mind and the brain, but sometimes my supervisor will say something to me that actually I already know, right, and I've had training in, but she's doing it very skillfully and in such a way that it has a very powerful impact when I hear it. Okay, so that's a little bit about questions. Oh, and there's also a certain amount of trial and error, right? So you might be with a practitioner or an expert person, and they might try something and see that it's not quite sinking in with you, or it's not quite, that it doesn't seem to quite be having the desired effect, right, for you or for them or what have you. And they might then shift course, right? Okay, we've tried that, that's not working so well, so we'll try this. And again, that's not going to happen if it's you in a book, right? There's a bit in the book, you can pick which chapter and so on, but you don't have like a live responsive person trying this and seeing how that goes, and then thinking, oh, well, if that didn't quite work this reason, maybe we'll try this. It's a kind of almost an experimentative process that evolves and shifts as it goes along, and it's never the same for two same people, I don't think, with any of these. And I think that does apply beyond therapy. I think that would probably also go for coaching, acupuncture, energy work, meditation, and so on. A journey where it's you and another person, it's always going to be a very unique, specific thing. Yeah. And I guess another point is that you don't have to, that it's very reassuring, to have someone who knows a lot about the subject and who has guided other people through a certain process and gone through a certain process themselves. You don't have to have that anxiety of like, will this work? Am I doing it properly? What if I don't? So if you're someone who's already struggling with anxiety, it'd be really useful to have like a calm, reassuring presence who's able to give you answers and be like, no, you're doing great. Just keep going, right? An expert person can also be really helpful for helping you to become aware of what you're doing, right? We're not always the best at being aware in the moment of what we're doing or of a certain pattern we've ended up in we don't even realise we're in. So how can you solve a problem if you don't know the problem's there, right? How can you shift away from a pattern if you're just kind of automatically repeating the pattern on autopilot and you haven't noticed it, right? And a therapist or another expert professional person would be able to do this in a very gentle way, in a very positive way, right? It's not about anyone having a go at you or saying, you're doing this badly. But at the same time, if I notice someone negatively framing something repeatedly, I or probably a lot of different kinds of therapists are eventually going to point that out in some way, right? If you're framing a particular relationship or a job or yourself in a way that's very negative, that's having a certain impact on your brain, right? And you might not even be hearing it or realizing it. Sometimes people think they're being realistic and they're actually being really dramatically negative, right? And then at a later point in the therapy process, they might think, oh, God, I was being so negative back at point A. But they couldn't even really see that themselves. So sometimes it takes that outside person with a lot of training and knowledge to be able to identify and confidently say, this is a very negative framing here. And have you considered alternatives? And, ways of establishing positive framings are this and this and this, and suggest and guide you through a process of finding different alternative framings and finding what feels right to you, not necessarily presenting some perfect solution, like you should think this instead, not at all, but more like helping you open up your thinking and creatively generate different ways of looking at your situation, looking at yourself, looking at the world. Another way that you might have a therapist or expert person usefully notice something about what you're saying or doing is if someone says, for example, it's kind of a silly example, if someone says 3 times, oh, I'd love to live by the sea, right? I'm going to point that out to them, right? Or if someone keeps saying they really want to do this kind of job, or they'd love to be this kind of person, or, simply someone else noticing that can be very powerful and intensely validating. And actually really helpful, because you might just not even have noticed that is a recurring thing, or not be giving that the importance that it has. So in lots of different ways, those are just two very simple examples really, but in lots of different ways we don't even realise half the time what we're saying or thinking or feeling unless we have someone else who's expertly trained to be listening to all of that and feeding back important things that they notice, or crossovers or similarities, between this person, how we're talking about this person and how we're acting ourselves, for example, or what we're saying we'd like things to be like and then how we're acting, or this kind of thing. And then once you've had all these amazing realizations, you can get expert guidance in therapy on how to change what you'd like to change. And again, this isn't about the therapist saying you should change this, do this, and you'll change that, right? Because then it's like, well, you might as well read a book, I suppose, right? Therapy is more kind of a co-creative process where, if something does come into your awareness that you want to change already, or you realise as part of the therapy, I want to change this, I want to work on that, I want to be more like this, I want to access this resource more, you can then use therapy as part of the process of figuring out the hows, right? And also how to inspire and motivate yourself to actually do those things then. How to communicate with yourself differently, how to use your imagination differently, to allow yourself to move forward in those ways. So you get that outside perspective, and from someone who's really trained to use that outside perspective in a way that has boundaries, that doesn't feel like someone's kind of being invasive or telling you what to do or having a go at you. It's very boundaried and very gentle and very positive, but it's also kind of firm, and it's someone who can hold their own boundaries and give you significant and useful input. Hopefully also, if you're in any kind of professional expert process, you'll be with someone who has training and also practical experience that helps with guiding someone through a process. So there are all kinds of incredibly useful processes that have been established, and I've talked about some of those as part of this series of videos, right? That you can do this process for accessing a state of calm, or this process for accessing a state of motivation, or this process for forgiving and letting go. There's all kinds of amazing processes and systems. But if you haven't gone through a process or a system before, it can be a bit confusing, it can be overwhelming, it can be hard to keep going on your own. And having someone there to guide you who has expertise and training in that process, in that specific process, and who's guided other people through it before is hugely helpful. Then another way that an expert person can be helpful is that sometimes an expert person may have skills that allow them to actually do something in the moment that will help. So just to give a very clear physical example, someone who's an acupuncturist is going to be actually, using a needle, doing something physical, right? Someone who's doing shiatsu massage, which has a psychological element too, will be using their hands, right? In the kind of work that I do with hypnosis, for example, I'm going to be someone who's very trained in using my voice and going into a particular state in a way that's helpful. So I can use my voice to suggest calm, for example, and I can deliberately, quite quickly and powerfully put myself into a state of deep calm. Something I have a lot of training in now, I have a lot of experience doing that. So I can reliably do that. And that's going to help the other person, the client in the therapy, to be able to do that too. Because we're herd creatures, right? At the end of the day, we learn best by mirroring and by copying. So if we see someone else doing the thing in practice, we can link up with that much more easily than just if we read about it in a book, for example. And in NLP, the version of this is where there are very complex language and communication processes that involve the other person as a partner, and where you can be guided through scripts, processes to change what you're imagining at a deep subconscious level. And you don't have to be in that process all alone. You can focus on the emotional work that you need to do without having to think so kind of intellectually about it, because the NLP practitioner or therapist is guiding you through that process. They're handling it all. They're keeping you safe, keeping you at a safe distance from the emotional experience, and they are guiding you through, now imagine this, and now do this, and move yourself here, and now I want you to, and they are managing the whole process, so you can simply relax into focusing on, the challenge of the emotional work. So you can be very held by what the therapist or practitioner is doing in that way, and it allows you to more easily, powerfully do the emotional work. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea then of how therapy and or other kinds of professional help can be really useful in bringing down and reducing anxiety. I'm Orla Kirby. You can look back at all of the other videos in this series to find out more about how you can reduce your anxiety. And let me know if you have any questions about any of the videos in this series. I'd love to be in touch with you.